It's finally time, folks. Time for another Monster Monday. Aside from being the best way to start your week, we're also finally starting on some monsters from Monster Hunter Wilds. We'll start as most things do, from the beginning with the cladding frog, the Chatacabra. I'm going to take a quick second to ask you to like the video and please consider subscribing to the channel. That said, I want to build monsters as I've actually faced them in game, which I am going to try to stream. Unfortunately, my computer is really struggling with Wilds, so it's been a bit slow going. However, I do have two monsters under my belt that we can at least take a look at until I can get that game functioning. The Chatacabra is the first large monster that we hunt in Wilds, and resembles a toad with a simian build, as well as having some scales that are based on certain groups of scaly prehistoric amphibians. Like many of the non-dragons from Monster Hunter, I've built the Chatacabra as an animal, and settled on level 4, which is pretty standard for the starter creatures I build for Monster Hunter, as you can see with the likes of the Great Jagras and similar creatures. Getting into the actual design here, our Chatacabra is built as a brute, and part of that is a high strength and constitution. This fits with its burly build, its sort of stocky and sturdy stature, which also contributes to it only using a low dexterity. Its heavy frame means that it isn't the most agile. Its wisdom is also low, as it doesn't seem to make particular use of it, though it certainly gets more benefit out of wisdom than it does intelligence or charisma. That wisdom also plays into its lower perception, befitting a base and brutal beast, though it is also equipped with low light vision. Outside of that, its singular skill is athletics, which is normally high given its strength, but when it's high jumping or long jumping, it goes all the way up to extreme, just playing into its nature as a buff frog. Since we are building the Chatacabra as a brute, it only uses a moderate armor class, but is compensated with a high pool of hit points. It has a weakness to electricity, but has some other defensive options that we'll get into when we start talking about abilities. While there isn't much to them, Chatacabras also have components that can be targeted at an armor class that is 1 point above high. Its saving throws are also very simple, and just go down the line, starting with a high fortitude save that is based on its high constitution, a moderate reflex that is meant to lean into its general physicality even if its dexterity lags behind, and finally a low will save, which is influenced by its low wisdom, leaving it susceptible to mental manipulations. That brings us to the Chatacabra's attacks. There's two here, and they both use a high attack bonus. The first strike is its fist, which has some basis on the gorilla's own fist strike, such as its reach, but I leaned into the Popeye-esque forearms of the Chatacabra and also gave it the forceful trait. On top of this damage increasing trait, the Chatacabra's fist deals high damage, making these powerful and potent punches. The Chatacabra also has its tongue strike, which has a longer reach, and the sweep trait, meaning that it is a bit more accurate overall. As such, it only deals moderate damage, so it'll likely be something to use when fighting on multiple fronts, or when foes fall just out of reach. From there, we can get into the Chatacabra's abilities. The first one that we'll look at is a passive effect, Incredible Leaps. In my fight against the Chatacabra, I noticed that it likes leaping around to slam down on foes, and this is meant to resemble that in part. Aside from providing Chatacabra with the effects of Quick Jump, the force of its takeoff and landing also require nearby creatures to attempt a high DC save to avoid being knocked prone. This could potentially help the Chatacabra in fleeing the scene, and I thought it was a fun idea, though smart players could cripple its legs component to disable this ability. In line with this power, the Chatacabra had a lot of terraforming types of abilities that I noticed. We express one of those with Tearing Charge, which is based on feats like Sudden Charge or Powerful Charge, except as the Chatacabra drags itself along the ground, it rips up the earth and leaves it all as difficult terrain. Again, this could cause foes to struggle to catch up to the Chatacabra, potentially increasing how long it can keep the fight going. With that in mind, I want to talk Gather Grit. This was actually one of the first things that I noticed about the Chatacabra. its habit of covering its arms in earthen matter to toughen up its fists. This is expressed as a single action that reduces the Chatacabra's fist strike to only a moderate attack bonus, but increases its damage to extreme, matching the fact that this makes its limbs heavier and harder to swing while keeping in line with the Brute roadmap. Additionally, this effect shields its arms, granting them the parry trait, as well as some hardness and HP that must be reduced to remove this effect. Players will get a chance to do so through the Stony Shield reaction. This is effectively just shield block using the hardness and HP from Gather Grit, so there's not too much to get into for it. Notably though, if your players get sick of the Chatacabra pulling this trick to tank their tactics, especially when it's doing so in conjunction with its escape abilities, they can target the Chatacabra's mucus glands component to disable the action that allows it to do so in the first place. We close out its abilities with Crater Crush, because what would a monster be without some sort of area attack? This is another of those terraforming effects I've seen the Chatacabra perform, where it'll hit the ground so hard it creates a crater, and kicks up a sizable cloud of dust. This deals its fist damage in a small area, so it can vary from merely high to extreme strike damage depending if it used Gather Grit first, and it requires a high DC reflex save. I'm always keen on having multiple saves represented in a creature's kit, and this is handy in that regard. The other aspect of this is that the Chatacabra hits the ground so hard, it leaves behind a cloud of dust that makes it concealed for a brief time, akin to spells such as Mist or a variety of other effects. Now one thing of note is that you could potentially combo this with an Incredible Leap, since we have those reduced to one action, and I think that makes for a very neat setup. I've also got some gear for this Gamma Gorilla, the glorious Grit Gloves. These pretty exactly draw from the Chatacabra's own fists, adding the forceful trait to unarmed attacks, but also adding an ability to coat your hands with nearby matter for some extra damage. You could also use this to emulate the 1989 movie Kickboxer, where fighters dip their hands in glue and then glass before their bout to ensure a more brutal battle. With all that though, we've covered the Chatacabra. This Titanic toad touts terrific toughness and tenacity, tearing up Terra and tossing targets in a traumatizing tangling tango. This is a fun, early level boss sort of monster, though it might be hard to set up as such. It's certainly not a schemer and is rather peaceable unless hunters bother it. So you might have to include it as a pet or minion of something or someone else, or otherwise force it into a fight with your players. This could also make a good getaway boss that the players have to chase down, given its ability to knock enemies prone while bounding, and the way it can leave behind difficult terrain to slow pursuers. Let me know what you think of this monster and what other creatures you'd like to see in a comment. If you like what you see on the channel and want to see more, check out the Monster Monday blog, which is linked below along with the Twitter and Discord. Thanks for watching, and have a monstrous Monday.